Sergeant Shifty Powers left the war zone. Do you know where he went? While his friends got back home safely, Shifty got stuck in Europe because he was badly hurt. This was a terrible blow to Shifty because he had never been hurt in a fight before. But that wasn't the end of Shifty's disaster. He had a lot more to his life than that. See the whole thing. Some people say that Shifty P's starting point is very good for him to become a fighter. He grew up in the rough Appalachians where the dense forests and rolling hills made it easy for him to spend his whole life exploring the outdoors. His father was a great shot with both a rifle and a pistol. He saw his son's promise early on and taught him the basics of shooting, taking the initiative. With his father's careful help, Powers developed a sharp eye and a steady hand, and he learned how to shoot quickly. He spent a lot of time in the woods catching small game and following animals through the forest to improve his skills. As his skills got better, his powers got to an incredibly high level of accuracy. He got so good that he could throw a coin into the air and shoot it with a gun before it hit the ground. That shows how good his reflexes, timing, and shooting skills are. Later, these skills would help him a lot in the military, where quick choices and accuracy could mean the difference between life and death. Powers loved the outdoors, but he was also very focused on his schoolwork. He finished from high school and continued his education by going to a vocational school in Norfolk, Virginia to learn how to machine things. At this point, he met Robert Papy Wynn, a classmate who would become a close friend. After finishing their training to be machinists, both men got jobs at the busy docks in Portsmouth, Virginia. Shipbuilding and repair were very important during World War II, so their work was very important to the war effort. But as the war got worse, the U.S. government started putting limits on labor. This meant that some skilled workers were frozen in their jobs, which meant they couldn't join the military and had to stay in their jobs. Powers and Wynn realized that they might soon be stuck in their dock jobs for good, so they decided to do something about it before it happened. They both felt a sense of duty and excitement, so they went to Richmond, Virginia to join the U.S. Army. Pow officially joined the people getting ready to fight in one of the deadliest wars in history on August 14, 1942. The name Shifty for P comes from when he played basketball in high school. He was known for having quick feet and being able to move quickly and accurately past players. The name came from how quickly he moved on the court, and it stuck with him long after he was done with school. His fellow soldiers in the army thought the nickname fit him perfectly when he joined. Not only because he used to be an athlete, but also because he has strong skills and can quickly adapt to new situations in battle. Fearless Powers followed Easy Company to their base in Albourne, England, where they would get ready for the attack of Europe that was being ruled by the Nazis. A quiet town in Wiltshire called Albourne became the temporary home of the paratroopers while they went through tough training, improved their fighting skills, and got ready for the airborne attack that would end Hitler's forces in Western Europe. The change from living in Canada to living in England opened Powers' eyes. When he was growing up in Virginia, he spent a lot of time outside. But the English countryside was rough, cute, and war-torn. Europe had been at war for years, and the people of Albourne had always been afraid that the Germans might come and take them over. One thing that shocked him the most was how unprepared the people there were for real battle. Many of them had cut up yard tools, pitchforks, axes, and even sharpened sticks to make makeshift weapons because they thought they could use them to fight off the well-equipped and battle-hardened German forces if they ever showed up. Powers, who had been training with some of the best weapons and strategies the U.S. Army had to offer, thought this was both brave and scary. He was sure that Hitler's troops would have killed a lot of people if they had ever attacked Albourne. Even though these people were brave, they wouldn't have had a chance against the cruel war machine that had already destroyed a lot of Europe. Even though war was a sobering reality, Powers and the men of Easy Company kept their focus on their goal and got ready for the biggest airborne attack in military history. In the early hours of June 6, 1944, Powers and the rest of Easy Company jumped on C-47 cargo planes and were ready to join the invasion of Normandy. The plan was for paratroopers to drop behind enemy lines before the main beach landings and take control of important roads, bridges, and towns so that German reinforcements couldn't attack Allied forces as they came ashore. The jump did not go as planned, though. A lot of paratroopers missed their drop zones because of machine gun fire, bad weather, and erratic flight patterns. Powers was among the people who were spread out and not with the main force. He didn't land with most of the Easy Company, instead he did so with 2 other troops from his unit. In the dark enemy-held farmland of Normandy, they got lost. Powers and his two friends had no idea where they were going and were surrounded by dangerous people, so they had to rely on their training and reflexes to stay alive. As they looked for other Allied troops, they carefully made their way through the bushes and fields, staying out of the way of German patrols. They finally made it to the rest of Easy Company, who were already in fight after several tense and uncertain days behind enemy lines. Powers fought with his fellow paratroopers in the Battle of Carentan after getting back with his unit. A very important battle that happened just a few days after D-Day. Carentan was a strategically important town because it was a key hub for getting from Utah Beach to Omaha Beach. If the Allies didn't protect the town, the Germans could use it to attack back and push the invading troops back into the sea. The battle was fierce, and Easy Company had to deal with strong German men, including elite Falster Jaeger German paratroopers. Soldiers fought house to house and in the streets during the fight for Carentan, which was very close battle. P's long-honed shot skills, which he had learned as a child, came in very handy in that dangerous place. In the tight urban wartime setting, every shot mattered, and he was a great soldier because he could stay calm under pressure. The town was finally taken back after days of non-stop fighting. This let the Allies connect their beachheads and keep moving inland. But there wasn't much time to rest. Soon Powers and Easy Company were getting ready for their next big job. He was a part of Operation Market Garden in September 1944. The ambitious military operation by the Allies' goal was to secure important bridges in the Netherlands so that they could quickly move into Germany. The idea was for troops in the air like Easy Company to take and hold key positions while forces on the ground rushed to connect with them. As winter came to a war-torn Europe, Shifty Powers and Easy Company were thrown into the Battle of the Bulge, which was one of the hardest and most important battles of World War II. When it started in December 1944, this huge German counteroffensive was meant to break through the Allied lines in the Ardennes forest in Belgium, take back important land, and eventually force a peace agreement. Hitler's army did something very risky, and for the men on the front lines it would be a very hard test of their strength, bravery, and ability to stay alive. Powers and the other paratroopers were stationed in the dense snow-covered woods that surrounded the important town of Bastonia. With temps dropping well below freezing, they had to deal with both constant enemy attacks and the harsh weather. The men of Easy Company had to deal with some of the worst conditions of the war. They were not properly dressed for winter and had very little food, ammo, and medical supplies. Even though things were hard, P's sharp observational skills from years of hunting in the Appalachian backwoods stayed sharp. He had already used his ability to notice small things around him to great effect in earlier fights. In this case too, it would make a huge difference. Powers saw something strange in the scenery on December 29, 1944, while Easy Company was digging in for defense in the woods. In a place where there wasn't one the day before, a tree had grown overnight and was more than a mile away. Powers knew right away that something was wrong because he was very familiar with the outdoor environment. Trees didn't appear out of thin air. He told First Sergeant Carwood Lipton about what he saw because he thought it might be dangerous. The company was in a terrible situation. They were circled by the enemy and didn't have many supplies, so they looked into any information that could help them. Lipton went with P's gut and paid attention to the situation. The tree wasn't really a tree when it was looked at more closely. It was actually a German anti-aircraft device that was well hidden. The enemy had hidden their position with cover, most likely so they could fire devastatingly at the American troops. Lipton acted right away when he realized the threat. He asked for permission to fire the whole battery at the area, even though the Allies were seriously short on gun shells. The request was approved because neutralizing the hidden German position was so important. Soon the enemy battery was hit over and over with gun shells. Within an hour there were no more people in the area, and the German forces were killed, hurt, or forced to flee. It was a huge win. Not with brute force but with smarts, good senses, and working together. Later Lipton thought back on the event and said, it all happened because Shifty saw a tree almost a mile away that wasn't there the day before. This was one of Powers' most impressive moments in the war. His ability to notice even the smallest changes in the landscape showed what amazing gifts his upbringing in the woods had given him for Easy Company. Growing up in Virginia's forests, he learned patience, accuracy, and an unwavering attention to detail. He had been unknowingly training for this moment his whole life. The battle for the small Belgian town of Foy on January 13, 1945 was one of the most intense parts of Easy Company's campaign in the Battle of the Bulge. After weeks of terrible conditions in the frozen woods outside of Bastonia, the men were finally given the order to attack and drive the Germans out of the heavily fortified town. As Easy Company moved forward, they were met with fierce resistance from well-positioned German troops. Machine gun fire and artillery fire rained down on them, and the open fields leading into Foy didn't offer much cover. An enemy sniper hid and started killing American troops one by one. The soldiers knew they were being targeted, but no one could see where the deadly shots were coming from. They were pinned down, unable to move forward, and more soldiers were dying. Things were very bad. Then, in the middle of all the chaos, Shifty Powers did what he did best. He saw what no one else could. Years of hunting in the Virginia woods had trained his eyes to notice even the smallest details, even when things were very dangerous and chaotic. "I see him," Power yelled all of a sudden. He quickly raised his gun, took a deep breath, and pulled the trigger. A single shot rang out and the sniper fire stopped right away. Later, when First Sergeant Carwood Lipton and Robert Papey Wynn went to check on the sniper's body, they were shocked to see that the enemy soldier was lying still with a single bullet hole in the middle of his forehead. Wynn shook his head in shock and said to Lipton, "You know, it just doesn't pay to be shooting at Shifty when he's got a rifle." This was another famous event in P's wartime service, and it showed exactly why he was such a valuable member of Easy Company. He was a great shot. Many paratroopers were trained to be great shooters, but Powers was in a class by himself. The shot he made that day in Foy was something most soldiers could only dream of. During the war, Powers and his brothers fought together without any problems in some of the most dangerous battles in Europe. He was one of the few men who had never been hurt in battle, which was both a blessing and a curse. The military used a point system to decide when soldiers could go home, with points given for things like time spent in combat, wounds received, and more. Since Powers had never been hurt, he didn't have enough points to go home. Even though he had been on the front lines every day, he had fought in every major battle with the best company. But because he wasn't hurt, he wasn't sent back first. Powers had no other choice but to enter a lottery that would give one man from each company a chance to go on furlough. Even though he had been fighting for years, fate finally had his side and he won. He was finally going home. But P's trip back to the United States took a tragic turn when his car was in an accident on the way to the airport. Powers was seriously hurt and had to be rushed to a military hospital. The peaceful life he had been looking forward to was not waiting for him when he got home. Instead, he was stuck in a hospital bed for months as he healed. While his fellow soldiers finally got back to the United States, they were reunited with their families and getting used to normal life. Powers was stuck overseas healing from his injuries. He had been through some of the deadliest battles of World War II without getting hurt, but then he had an accident right before he was supposed to leave the war behind. After the war, Shifty Powers went back to normal life like many of his fellow soldiers. He went from the battlefields of Europe to work and family. Honorably discharged during the demobilization period after the war, Powers tried to get his life back on track after being interrupted by years of combat. He went back to work as a machinist, a job he had taken before joining the army. He moved to California and found work there, supporting his family in a new place far from his Appalachian roots. As an experienced craftsman, he worked in manufacturing for 3 years. But when the company he worked for lost a government contract, Powers was fired. This setback made him go back to Virginia, where he eventually found stable work with the Clinchfield Coal Corporation. Over the course of more than 20 years, Powers worked as a machinist for the company and settled into a more peaceful life. The job was steady, but it wasn't easy. Coal mining operations were hard on everyone, even those who worked with machines instead of going underground. Despite the challenges, Powers remained committed to supporting his family, showing the same toughness and dedication that had made him such an important soldier in good times. Dorothy, his wife, was always there for him, even when things went wrong in life. They were married for an amazing 60 years, which shows how strong their love was. She was by his side through the ups and downs of post-war life, giving him the stability and company that so many veterans wanted. As the years went by, P's health started to get worse.
Like many of his fellow paratroopers, he struggled with depression as he got older, and the effects of war lingered in his mind. This is a common but often unspoken problem among veterans who have seen the horrible things that happen in combat. But in the early 2000s, something unexpected happened that gave Powers a new sense of purpose. When the HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was based on Stephen Ambrose's book of the same name, came out, it told the story of Easy Company to a whole new generation. The show captivated millions of viewers and sparked new interest in the real men who had fought in those battles. Suddenly, Powers and his fellow veterans were in the spotlight, recognized and honored in a way that not many World War II soldiers had ever experienced. Powers got over his depression with the support and attention of people all over the world. He started giving speeches where he talked about his personal experiences in the war. Meeting younger people who were eager to hear his story gave him a new sense of purpose. His family later thought that the renewed interest in his life and service may have literally added years to his life by keeping him engaged and connected in a way he hadn't been before. In 2009, Powers was one of 20 veterans from Easy Company who contributed to the book We Who Are Alive and Remain: Untold Stories from the Band of Brothers. The book was filled with personal insights and untold stories from men who had lived through the war. For Powers, it was the last chance to share his story and make sure that the memories of Easy Company and the sacrifices they made would not be forgotten. In June of that same year, Powers died in Dickinson County, Virginia, after a long fight with lung cancer. He was 86 years old. He was buried at Temple Hill Memorial Park in Castlewood, Russell County, Virginia, after a life of service, hard work, and persistence. Shifty Powers was known for his unwavering commitment, sharp instincts, and unwavering loyalty to his friends and co-workers in Easy Business. A very early draft of Stephen Ambrose's book Band of Brothers, however, had a part that really upset him. In that draft, Ambrose wrote that on December 23, 1944, during the siege of Bastonia, Powers had turned down a direct order from Lieutenant Edward Shames to go on patrol because he didn't want to. Neither Powers nor Shames believed this to be true. They both strongly denied that such a thing had ever happened. For Powers, who had fought with Easy Company in every major battle without ever getting hurt, the claim that he had disobeyed an order out of doubt hurt his service and character. He was angry that his reputation was being slandered in the story. Lieutenant Shames, who was known for being a strict leader and follower, also denied the claim, which made it even clearer that the story was not based on facts. When Powers and others who knew the truth learned about the mistake, they worked to have the story changed. Following requests for confirmation, Ambrose admitted the mistake and later took the passage out of later editions of Band of Brothers. Even though the mistake was fixed, Powers, who was proud of how reliable he was as a soldier, was still upset that it had been printed in the first place. The book wasn't the only thing that was wrong about P's role in a patrol mission. The HBO miniseries Band of Brothers, which was based on Ambrose's book, also had Powers in the wrong role. In the episode The Last Patrol, he was seen on a nighttime patrol across the Rye River with other soldiers on a dangerous mission to capture German prisoners. Powers, played by Peter Youngblood Hills, wasn't actually on that patrol, but his character got more screen time and dialogue than some of his fellow Easy Company members. The show did a great job of staying true to the story overall, but they did change some details, like which soldiers were involved in which events for dramatic effect or to make the story flow better. Even with these mistakes, Band of Brothers did a good job of showing how quiet and skilled he was as a soldier. It also helped bring his name to a new generation of viewers, making sure that his contributions would not be forgotten. Even though he was misrepresented in some ways, his legacy as a great marksman and loyal member of Easy Company stayed strong. Leave your thoughts in the part below. We hope this video was helpful. If you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.